Hi, Joshua Parker here again, and I get a lot of questions on a regular basis about audio frequencies, radio frequencies, and sideband frequencies, and harmonics, and all these kinds of things. So I wanted to make this video to clarify some of the things, some of the history behind these frequencies, and where they were used, and why there's so much confusion on this subject. Because really there's a lot of confusion about why different frequencies and different frequency ranges were used historically, and what led to a lot of the machines today using specific types of frequencies versus other frequencies. And in case you're not familiar with the work I've done in this field, I've been involved in this for well over 15 years, since I was straight out of college and studying this kind of stuff just digging into really underground kind of information at the time, and really trying to understand it myself. And this led to a lot of crazy stuff. I gave away a bunch of frequencies, then was pursued for a patent infringement lawsuit, and led to a bunch of really big mess in my business. And now I'm back on track here, and just trying to spread the good information again here. So first of all, I wanted to shed some light on the original derivation of the audio frequencies that so many of the machines today are using. And this is in sharp contrast to what a lot of information out there might tell you, because really originally the machines in the 1930s that were the machines that really kind of gave this technology the reputation that it has today, were using really audio. They were using radio frequencies, not audio frequencies. So radio frequencies are higher frequencies, and all the original frequencies were actually radio frequencies. Those were the lowest frequencies that actually worked well. And it wasn't until the 50s and 60s, when there was kind of a movement to bring the technology back, this kind of lost technology, let's bring it back. That's when the audio frequencies started to come into play. And I'm going to explain why in this video, why those frequencies were actually a confusion of the original technology, and really why actually that led to some really interesting new technology that's emerged starting in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, really, and become rather popular into our modern day today. So when you go back to the original technology in the 1930s, it's important to understand that radio frequency was used a lot in a lot of different electrotherapy devices. It was such a common thing that actually in that time frame in the 1930s, it was causing problems with interference. And the original technology was part of that, along with a lot of other devices that were causing this interference problem. This was at a time when AM talk radio was becoming really popular. And actually in that era, the electrotherapy devices in some places were actually banned from use between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. during this prime time for talk radio. And this was at a time when the FCC was gaining a lot of power. And so this interference was actually a really serious issue back then. So this being a problem, the electrical engineer that was building all these machines in the 1930s was actually, and he was contracted to do that, and then became a partner in in the company that was producing the machines that were ultimately supposed to be sold to doctors back then. And the goal of some of these devices, that in trying to transition them out of just a lab use type of device into a device that could be shipped to doctors, was that they had to be smaller, for one thing. But another of the goals was to make it so that it wasn't interfering directly with the AM talk radio and AM radio signals that were becoming so much more popular in that time frame. And so what was done was that it was figured out that higher harmonics actually could be used. So now lower harmonics didn't work, but higher harmonics, when they were stepped up into a higher radio frequency harmonic, that would actually work. And so what the engineer did was he mathematically calculated the higher harmonics of a lot of the original frequencies, and actually really all of the original frequencies were translated into higher harmonics. And then he figured out that a carrier frequency could be set and fixed at in the range of about 3 megahertz. And that way the audio frequency that was used in combination with the radio frequency carrier would be the only frequency that varied. And by varying that audio frequency in very specific blocks, just specific audio frequencies were running that would trigger sidebands from that fixed radio frequency carrier. Now, a sideband frequency is just basically, if you take that carrier, let's say it's 3 megahertz, just to make it simple, and you have 100 kilohertz frequency, or let's say you have a 10 kilohertz to keep it in the audio frequency range. So if the audio frequency is 10 kilohertz and the radio frequency carrier is 3 megahertz, which is 3 million, then essentially what you have with sidebands is you have a sideband every 10 kilohertz. So that means below and above the carrier frequency, the 3 megahertz, you're going to have a bunch of sidebands tapering down and going up in frequency. So down you'll have 2.9, and then going down incrementally and then 3.1, 3.2. So it's going to be and actually that's I didn't quite do the math correctly there, because actually it's 10 kilohertz, not 100 kilohertz. So if it was 100, then it would be 3.1 and 2.9. But in this case, it would actually be 2.99 and 3.01. And so there was a math. The point is not to get into all this math, but that there was a specific mathematical correlation of the audio frequency and the radio frequency. And that's how the technology originally worked. So it wasn't that the radio frequency that was running, the fixed carrier, was a magic number, but it was actually the combination of the two, of the audio frequency and the radio frequency, that triggered a secret, at the time, frequency in a sideband that would actually do the work. And at the time, it was much harder than it is today to decipher what frequencies were running within all these signals. And in that way, this device could be delivered as a machine that was basically running proprietary frequencies. because the problem with getting patents in this era was that these actual devices that they were building were really the same as any ham radio broadcasting oscillator was designed. It was really an open source type of, well, not really open source, but more like a public domain type of apparatus that they were running. The only unique thing was the way they were running very specific frequencies. But with this sideband method, they were able to hide the working frequencies. Unfortunately, in the years following the release of their production model, this machine that was running these kind of proprietary frequencies, these hidden sidebands, and these machines worked really well. There were only a few of them ever produced. The doctors that got a hold of them, that used them with their clients, are the ones that solidified the reputation of these devices. And that's how the good reputation that this technology has even existed, was because of those few machines. But the problem is that the knowledge of how those machines were running was held in the brain of this engineer, and the engineer ended up really, the way the history went, there's evidence that he was bought out by the likes of Morris Fishbein and the AMA, and basically went against the technology in a way, and a legal battle ensued, and the partnership, the company was dissolved, and essentially he never revealed the way he had engineered the technology. And keep in mind, the knowledge of the electronics were held in this engineer's brain, as opposed to the optics, because we know about the microscope and the history of that microscope that was so unique, and that engineering was very, it was well understood by him, but the knowledge of the way the production model and was running frequencies was never disclosed. And we know that from the legal transcripts that we have transcriptions, they're available online, and anyone can read those. And so we know that there was missing information that was not conveyed, and was basically held back by this engineer, and it's a very unfortunate situation, but that's what led to basically a lot of confusion with frequencies, and with why we had this set of audio frequencies that were really not ever MOR frequencies, mortal oscillatory rate or kill frequencies. There's a lot of people that seem to think that those audio frequencies were actually kill frequencies or MOR frequencies, but really they didn't work like that unless they were properly calibrated mathematically to the radio frequency carrier. So but this is where those audio frequencies originally came from. So it's really interesting that in the 1950s, when the technology was attempted to be brought back, but the funding really wasn't there. There wasn't a multi-million-dollar laboratory funded by the ball bearing mogul that funded the original technology, and that's why on a shoestring budget, just a straight audio frequency generator was modified, or that's a lot of the machines that started being developed in the 50s and 60s were really just running those original audio frequencies stripped off the carrier. They had no radio frequency carrier, and that really evolved into a lot of the audio frequency machines that we see today, and that's kind of the story behind those audio frequency machines. But the interesting thing about that is that really, when you look back at that, you can see that a lot of those audio frequencies that were used starting back in the 50s and 60s with those machines ended up being pulled into this whole new realm of microcurrent devices that and that technology has blossomed into a huge science, and a lot of great new technologies have come out of that. So it's a really interesting thing. Yeah, they're not MOR frequencies; they never were. But now we know a lot about how these lower frequencies are, affecting muscle contractions and relaxation, and also potentially affecting various metabolic processes and stuff like that. So there's a lot to it, and a lot has come about from this kind of mistake of and confusion about the original frequencies that were used, and so keep that all in mind when you're looking at these machines, and looking at machines that are, some of them are just running audio frequencies, and even though they're running those audio frequencies through a plasma tube, it might not be just like the original technology, because that just because it has a plasma tube, if it's not running a radio frequency carrier along with an audio pulse, and if they're not calibrated and mathematically correlated, really it may not be running with that historical method that was started in the 1930s. So that's what I wanted to cover in this video. I hope you found this to be helpful. Look forward to hearing your feedback on it. You can type in comments here and here on this post, and let me know your thoughts. I look forward to reading through that, and always wanting to push this technology to the next level. So let me know how I can help. And thanks again for watching.